looking forward to this trip for quite some time. An 8-day trip around Victoria, largely off-road. We trailered our bikes to Albury where we settled in for the night. These knuckleheads were going to be my companions for the next 6 days. And you can probably see the odd person out is Nick on his KTM 690. And it didn't take long before the KTM jokes came out and we made bets on how long before the KTM would break down. However, Nick wasn't too worried about our jabs. He was too busy perfecting his blue steel pose. And John and HD had done a great job preparing shirts for the tour to mark the occasion.
Blue steel.
Day one came and we were pretty excited to get going. This was going to be a tour in 4 parts, and part 1 was all about the river. We were going to spend the first 2 days riding along the Murray River and just getting to know the river and enjoying the river tracks. Now, unfortunately, it didn't take long for us to get our first breakdown. And you guessed it, it was Nick on the KTM 690. The bike had just come out of the shop a few days earlier, and Nick hadn't had a chance to give it a good test ride. Unfortunately, there was a timing issue that was causing some vibrations, and Nick didn't feel comfortable riding it until he worked out what it was. So Nick found a local shop in Albury, and the owner was amazing. He tried everything to see if he could get Nick's bike on the road, but it wasn't to be. So Nick put his bike on the trailer and he decided he was going to drive the four-wheel drive as a support vehicle for the rest of us. So a couple of fun facts about the Murray. It's Australia's longest river at 2,500 kilometres, of which 2,000 kilometres are navigable, which makes it the 3rd longest navigable river in the world, behind only the Amazon and the Nile River. And I felt kind of bad that I had really not seen any of it in my whole life, so I was pretty excited to just explore this incredible river. We had absolutely perfect weather conditions, and the riding was easy, it was flowy, and we were just constantly cutting in and out to the river and just exploring it. We crossed over between Victoria and New South Wales multiple times and saw the river from both sides. Most of the riding that we did along the Murray was off-road, and a particular highlight for me was going through Barmah National Park. I found that just fun, beautiful, flowy tracks. We weren't camping on this trip, so that meant we were travelling light, and especially now that we had a support vehicle, essentially the bikes were unladen. We just had tools and a few spares on them. day 2, we pulled into our hotel in Robbinsvale and just enjoyed some snacks and beers by the pool. So if part 1 was all about the river, part 2 is definitely all about sand. We were spending the next 2 days riding through a couple of national parks that are quite well known for their sand. And there was one bit in particular that we were quite concerned about, and that's this bit here. It's called the Milburn Rock Track, and it's 60 kilometres of deep, chopped up sand. We knew all about this track, but we kind of set this as our big challenge for the trip. The problem was, none of us were really flash in sand. So we planned to use Murray Sunset National Park as a bit of a training ground to see how we handled the sand, because we knew there was sand there, but it wasn't as long or deep. So here's our route for day 3. We started by going through Hattakilkine National Park, and then it was across into Murray Sunset National Park, which had, probably 10 to 15 kilometres of deepish sand. And then that night we decided to head for Pinnaroo, just because there was more food options than there were at Murrayville. Day 4, and we were going to ride from Pinnaroo to Horsham, hopefully via the Milburn Rock Track. We started day 3 riding through Hattakilkine National Park, and it was beautiful. It was early morning light with the sun behind us, and it was such a picturesque national park. We were just cruising along. There was lots of early morning animals like roos and wild pigs, and we were just enjoying this absolutely stunning national park. These beautiful lakes with their trees in them would have to be one of the highlights. We then stopped to refuel at Hatta Roadhouse because we had a 230 kilometre leg between fuel stops. And the guys can't resist a good briefing. Then we were on our way into Murray Sunset National Park. And this is where it really became desert with big sky views. And I love riding in this open desert terrain. There's just something magical about the Australian outback, and I don't think there is a better way to experience it than on an adventure bike. You can smell it, you can kind of feel it when you're riding along. I've done some riding in the US, and I've also done some riding in Iceland. But what I really love about riding in Australia is just the vast distances and the wilderness that we have. When you're riding in places like Murray Sunset National Park, you are a long way from anywhere, and you feel that remoteness, and I love that. Then the sand started getting deeper. And we started getting used to the deep sand and how our bikes were handling. And this is what happens when you forget to disable your traction control in deep sand. Watching us ride through deep sand wasn't always the prettiest of sights, but we managed to get through without too many problems. Then we rendezvoused with our support vehicle at one of the pink lakes. These pink lakes really were beautiful, and it's a great place just to stop, have a drink and a breather after getting through the deep sand. We were feeling quite chuffed with ourselves that we'd managed to get through the deep sand without too many problems, and we were feeling quietly optimistic that we should be able to ride the Milburn Rock track tomorrow. HD was getting some gorgeous drone shots, but then he pushed his luck just a little beyond his skill level. After about 200 kilometres of dirt, we finally hit the blacktop and headed for Pinaroo. So it was day 4, and this is when we're going to do our challenging Milburn Rock track. I think it's fair to say that there was a little bit of anxiety in the air, and the lighting was just bizarre and almost ominous. So here's what happened when we got to the turnoff. The guys actually got a case of cold feet, and they weren't too sure whether they wanted to do the Milburn Rock track. So I decided to just lead the way and show them how it was done. Okay, so some of you may have realised this is not actually me riding. This is HD. This is me riding the Milburn Rock track. And it was on this trip that I discovered I'm suffering from a condition called amophobia. And for those that don't know what amophobia is, it's the fear of sand. And I had the fear of sand on this track. We all had a go riding the Milburn Rock track, and I think that it should be renamed the Shitful Sand Track. It was horrible. I didn't like it at all, and I knew I would not be able to ride 66 kilometres down that track. HD is probably the best rider in our group, but just watch him starting on that track, and you'll get a sense for how tricky it really is. And he was on a lighter 500cc bike, and I was on a heavier 701. And I just didn't have the skill, nor did I have the fitness for doing that track. And I think one of the most important things in adventure riding is knowing when you're getting out of your depth and when it's time to turn around. Now, besides being a good rider, HD's also a masochist, and he actually enjoyed riding that track. But I think he even felt it was too much for him.
Well, that's a lot of fun.
You could do it.
More than that for 60 Ks? No way.
So we went to Plan B and we continued down the Murrayville-Mill Road. When we got to Horsham, we wanted to do some planned maintenance on a few of the bikes. So we phoned ahead and contacted this bike shop and asked them if it was okay to use their facilities. And they were fantastic. And the service manager, Ian, thank you, you were super accommodating. So hats off to them.
Look at that little guy.
Then we settled in for a few beers and snacks by the pool and a great Thai at the local Thai place. Part 3 was all about the forests, and in this leg we were going to ride through the Grampians and then make our way east through the various forests and state parks and head out to Mansfield. But first we wanted to check out some of the incredible silo art that we saw on the way into Horsham. And if you haven't checked out the silo art, there are hundreds of amazing works of art on silos. These works of art are incredibly impressive. And I think I might just have to plan a road trip in the future to go silo to silo and see more of these incredible works. We then set off to the Grampians and we went via Graham's Bridge Road, which was just a lovely flat dirt road. And now we really were getting into the forest. And we rode some really fun tracks in the Grampians. And the views from the Grampians lookouts were just incredible. And after leaving the Grampians, we got back into the forest trails and we rode a mixture of dirt roads, twin track, and just very beautiful scenery. When we got to Wombat State Forest, there were plenty of little single tracks and interesting little side trails to explore, which made the riding a lot of fun. I enjoyed the forest leg. It was such a contrast from the wide open spaces of the deserts that we rode on the leg before. And the forests themselves, they were beautiful. Just gorgeous trees, the light was beautiful, and it was a lot of fun just riding through them. And even when we came out of the forests, we were riding along farmland, but there was some stunning views. It really is beautiful countryside. rolled into Mansfield, the entrance to our hotel was through the Bottle-O, which we thought was a match made in heaven. So we settled into the pub and we reflected on what a wonderful part 3 was, the forests, and we started getting ready for our final stage, part 4, the mountains. The last part of the ride was going to be in Vic High Country, and this is definitely one of the highlights. So part 4 was all about the mountains. We were riding from Mansfield to Dargo through the Alpine National Park, and then from Dargo, pretty easy routes back to Albury. At least that was the plan. But unfortunately, adventure rides don't always go to plan. And the day didn't start well when I found that I had a punctured radiator and I'd lost all my coolant. I must have copped a stone or something. And there was no way I was going to ride out into some of the toughest terrain in Australia with a damaged bike. So unfortunately, I was out and on the trailer, and that left 4. So the guys headed out, not realising that within a couple of hours, one of them was going to end up in hospital. The day started off fine. The riding was pretty easy, and everyone was just enjoying the early morning riding into high country. The pace wasn't fast. Everyone was just cruising along at a leisurely pace and just enjoying the riding, enjoying the views. Next thing you know, Coco was down and he fell hard, and he knew straight away that there was something wrong with his wrist. Our resident nurse and Mother Duck sprung into action and put his years of medical training to work.
Check the thumb. Check the.
But when you've done something major, you just know. And Coco knew straight away that he'd done something pretty major to his wrist. So the guys contacted the support truck, made Jeff comfortable, and arranged to get him out of there to hospital.
I've got a bandage.
Nick's triage style is quite interesting. Let's focus on hair and makeup and make sure Coco looks good first, then we'll treat the injury.
Brent should be filming this.
Any closing words?
Ouch.
Ouch, yep, it's a good way to frame it, yep. The mother of the group, are you okay?
Yeah, it's poor dear.
Poor dear.
So we transported Coco to Mansfield District Hospital, where he was really well looked after, and then made arrangements to get his bike picked up.
So he's squished his bone like that into there, so that's why he needs surgery.
It's a real bummer finishing such a wonderful trip with an injury to a rider. Bikes can be repaired pretty easily, but it's tougher when you've got physical injury. But I know that Jeff's had the operation, I know he's healing well, and hopefully it won't be long before he's back out riding again.
Yeah, it's all right.